Mark, you grew up in Neath, South Wales, rugby heartland. How does a kid go from there and end up at Tottenham Hotspur as a teenager?
Yeah, I guess so. What it was, I went to back in the day a comprehensive school. It was St Joseph's Comprehensive School, and it was you had to sort of grow up fast, let's say, when you went there. But obviously, I'd been, I got a brother 4 years older than me, and I'd been showing some promise probably at the local, what we call the boys' club, and playing, just every night of the week. Couldn't get enough football. And a teacher came up to me one day at school. And I think he knew anyway, or somebody had approached him, and he sort of knew I was a supporter of Manchester United. And I was a supporter of Manchester United because of my brother being 4 years older, and they had a very special player at the time at the club called George Best. So that really sort of garnered my interest as a really young kid, and he came up to me. He said, "I said Manchester United," and his next thing he said to me, it's actually a funny story. He said, "Right, I've got a Manchester United scout who wants to take you to Manchester United for trials." And I was 11 years old. I was like, "Right, okay." So I ran home from school, and bless him, my dad, he's passing, not with us anymore, but he'd smile when he heard the story, because he used to come home from work, and he'd obviously working hard all day. He'd have his dinner at night, and he'd lie on the sofa, take his shirt off, and sometimes even take his trousers off and be lying there in his pants. And and I sort of said, "Well, look, this Man United scout's coming," and he half laughed, and my brother laughed, my sister laughed, and then what happened? About an hour later, there was a knock on the front door, and I answered it, and this big guy stood there, and he was an old guy, full head of silver hair, and he said, "Hi, Mark." He said, "My name is Walter Robbins." His name was, and he said, "I'm a Manchester United scout." And soon as those words left his lips, there was like somebody probably thrown a grenade in the lounge in my house, because every was pandemonium going on there. Dressing, my dad putting his shirt on quickly and everything. Anyway, so he came in and he just said, "Look, I'd like to take you up there for trials." So it became, moving sort of swiftly forward, it became a situation then. Obviously, I was showing more and more promise, and it was a difficult upbringing, because what used to happen back here in England, that the summer holidays, the summer vacation, kids would get 6 weeks off school. And it got to a stage by the time I was like 13, 14 years old, that my whole 6 weeks was planned, that I was going to Manchester United one week, Tottenham Hotspur the next week, Leeds United the week after that, Chelsea the week after that, just to sort of. And I guess I missed a little bit of my certainly my friends and my childhood because of that. And then, but always knowing or feeling or being focused that I was going to be a professional footballer. So, and again, moving forward, I narrowed, they all wanted to sign me. I narrowed it down to Manchester United or Tottenham Hotspur. The slight difference on that was that Tottenham Hotspur had already shown me as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old where I'd be living if I went there, with a nice family who were supporters of the club. So it was more of a fear going to Man United just on that, because I'd been staying in a hotel every time I went there. So at 15 and a half, I left South Wales on my own, I might add. Put on a train at the station, and went to London, and made my way across London, and joined Tottenham Hotspur. And I was spent in a real sort of fantastic period for the club. Top footballers there at the time. Great place to learn my football. They had a philosophy at the club. I was playing good attractive football as well. So I made my debut for the first team when I was 19. Didn't play as many games as I thought I should have, and by the time I got to, I think it was about 21, it was time to move on, and I moved to Norwich City. Yeah, and I had 9 years, probably my best football at Norwich City. And again, for people in the States who might not know a lot about Norwich, I can assure you, it was a period in the club's history there where, I mean, in the 9 years I was there, I think like the first 6, 7 years we finished in the equivalent to, or the Premier League itself. We finished, I think it was third, sixth, fourth, fifth, third, right the way through. So we were really, really good football inside. Yeah, so I know I'm rushing through it, but my football career from then, I went from Norwich to West Ham, and then I had a chance to
Let me,
go.
let me stop you in Norwich for a while because I don't want to sell that life story short. They acquire you in 1987. You're there for 9 years,
Yeah,
for the 99 appearances.
yeah,
Player of the year. Probably the best left back in the club's history. What was it about Norwich that turned that club into a home for you?
Again, I had a chance at the time to sign for a couple of other clubs, Manchester City being one of them. But I'd grown up at Tottenham with a group of friends, group of players, and by this time, I think 2 or 3 of them had left and gone to Norwich. I think they had a philosophy at Norwich of playing really attractive football, and that sort of migrated their thinking towards Tottenham Hotspur. So they always have somebody, the manager or one of his staff at Norwich, would be watching Tottenham Hotspur's reserve side, which I was in most of the time. So they knew us really well. And when I had a chance then to follow my teammates, again, thinking away from the football side, I thought, well, the best chance I'll have of settling down in an environment that I knew and was a bit friendly was a place where 2 or 3 players I already knew there. So, and the club itself, as I said, had a real philosophy of trying to sort of say almost like push and run and keep the ball on the floor and move it quickly. So, and we had good footballers. We really did have good footballers at the time.
And the success took you to the UEFA Cup.
Yeah.
Travel to Munich, Olympiastadion, Bayern at home. You're a left back from Neath, and you score a goal that puts you up 2-0.
Yeah,
Take me through that moment.
I don't know I was doing that far forward, to be fair, Alex. It was a rush of blood to the head, I think. I guess it was. So the fellow who's taking the free kick was, again, an old teammate of mine from Tottenham who'd now moved to Norwich. His name was Ian Crook, and a really talented player. Never got the recognition he deserved, really. He was in a type of a Glenn Hoddle, and again, any of your listeners who know their football would, if they don't know him, then look up Glenn Hoddle, because he was a real rare talent, and Ian Crook was along the same line. So we had a deep free kick. Ian Crook was taking it, and I just gambled. I saw the flight of the ball and I gambled, and it sort of just cleared the head of our striker, took one bounce, and it just sat up perfectly. And I took the Brazilian right back called Jorginho, almost like took him by surprise, I think. What's this full back doing, charging into the penalty box? And I managed to get, if you like, half a yard in front of him and made a good connection and scored the goal. And yeah, it's. I don't think my goal celebration was too clever on the back of it, but because it was such a rare thing. But no, it was a real proud moment. And as I said, we knocked Bayern Munich out, and then we actually went to, I think it was the semi-finals. Then we played Inter Milan, and believe it or not, we lost both games. I think it was 1-0 both games. Perhaps my memory's not great on that, but. We got beaten 2 goals, I think, from Dennis Bergkamp, again, who was a world-class player at the time. And let me tell you again, in both games, you could argue we were the better side in both games, but obviously didn't get the goals. And so we covered ourselves in glory coming out, in I think at that stage of the competition, being a small club, provincial club. And but I always tell people, I mean, I think it was the first year of the inaugural year of the Premier League. I think it was in the end of January, the season going from August to May. By the end of January, we were 7 points clear at the top. I think with a game in hand, and we were playing Manchester United, who were in second place at home. And you're thinking if we'd have won that game, we'd have been 10 points clear with a game in hand. But it was proverbial, as they call it, 6-pointer it was. But we got beaten on the night, took a big hit from it, and then faded a little bit in the back end of the season, but and ended up finishing 3rd in the league. But I always tell people now, just a quick story about, bless him, I still watch the club from afar, like Norwich, when you talk about the standards, because I can remember playing for Norwich where we would play Liverpool at home, and it was one specific time we were drawing 0-0 at half time, and we literally got booed off the park by our fans. 0-0 at home to Liverpool, and our home fans are booing us off the pitch because they didn't think it was good enough. It's just sign of the times, I guess. Yeah, happy times I had there.
All right, well, let's fast forward to the managerial bit. You spend the better part of 2 decades as Mark Hughes' right hand.
Yeah.
Wales, Blackburn, Man City, Fulham, QPR, Stoke, Southampton, 537 Premier League games together. A partnership like that, what does it actually look like from the inside?
Yeah, good question. It was, Mark and I had known each other. He's Welshman like me. He was from North Wales. I was from South Wales. So we got into sort of Wales national teams at an early age. became friendly. And that's how the connection started, really, because we remained friends going through. And when Mark had a chance his first job was actually with the Welsh national team. He asked me to go along and be his assistant manager with that. And then, again, the progression from that was he got into the Premier League with Blackburn Rovers, and we went on together. We had a good understanding because Mark's quite a laid-back character, probably not as fiery as myself at times, certainly, but we had just a good sort of dovetailing together. I did, if you like, most of the coaching. Mark I think he classed himself more as a manager. He was very good at motivation. He was very good at man management, and left a lot of the coaching and let's call it a little bit of the strategic development of the team with myself. And we had, not in trophies as so much, but certainly, we had a lot of relative success at the clubs we had. A lot of the clubs we went into were, in poor states at the time and threatened by relegation, and we went in there and turned them around and had good situations with them. And even the Manchester City one, we went into Manchester. We had 4 good years at Blackburn Rovers where I think we got something like 6 semi-finals and European football for Blackburn, and kept them, in the top 10 of the Premier League. And then we had a chance to go to Manchester City. Not with the current owners, I might add, with Thaksin Shinawatra, who was the ex-president of Thailand. He was the owner. So we went to Manchester City, but that quickly developed where Thaksin was coming out of it and selling the club, and the club was then purchased by Sheikh Mansour. And we were really, I must say, we were at the very beginning of it. A lot was asked of us in terms of, them coming in, that ownership group coming in and asking us to help develop the club, take it, initial steps from where it was. I think, not myself, but I think Mark always realised or thought, look, they're going to want their own man in. New people coming into the club. We were already there, and he was right, because after about 18 months, they brought Roberto Mancini in, and we ended up leaving the club. But I wouldn't have a bad word said about the place, because there was a lot of pressure at the start. Trying to put the foundations in, let's say, and I'm very proud of the work we did there. Again, we actually got sacked from Manchester City when we were. I won't tell you the background, though, other than the fact we found out about it from a press reporter the morning of a game. But we actually got sacked, and we were 3rd in the Premier League with a game in hand, and we were in the semi-final of the League Cup that was due in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. So it didn't quite sit kindly, when you're thinking we're actually doing well here. But they wanted their own person in, and you move on. That's football.
It is. And you have had the opportunity to work inside of it for your career, and you've had very, very different ownership structures across your career. Clubs that had almost no resources and clubs that had almost unlimited resources. What do those contrasts teach you about what actually makes a football club function?
Quite difficult, that, because I think you the first point I would say, Alex, is you go in, in yourself in your position there at the club. It's almost the first point of reference is, I think, if you like, your upbringing and the way you are as a person. You want things done right. You want to try and create a culture that just feels right. That a bit of good morals and good respect amongst people within a club. And I'm a great believer in putting demands on players as well. Making them understand that we are in a business which is whether you're playing for Barcelona or Real Madrid, or whether you're playing further down the pyramid, it's a brutal business. Because you have to win. Whether there's money involved or it was just pride or whatever it is, whether you're playing on a park pitch on a Sunday or in a big stadium, everybody wants to win. And if you don't win, your coach is going to find somebody who's better to fill that role. So for all players, coaches, managers as well, it's a brutal business, and it is a little bit like you either fight it and go with it, and you're strong mentally, or you fail, you fall. I always say to all players that I work with, and especially young players developing, coming up, it's a very simple phrase: the game and success in the game isn't from, like I say, there down. It's from there up. that's where games are won and lost. That's where environments are created, whether you're a coach or a player, whatever. And it's making sure that those environments created. I had an employer said to me, as you know, I'm a sport director now, and an employer said to me, well, how are you going to, you come into the club, but you say you're going to create an elite culture. Well, how are you going to do that? And I said, well, look, I can spend the next sort of 2 hours talking you through different points, but the simplest answer to give you is that I've spent my whole life working in elite environments, and there's just things that you see on a day-to-day basis, and you just think that's got to be better. That isn't right. So it's hard to actually put it into words, but it's just a feeling you have for a place, and it's about standards. Yourself, you'll look around your club and you'll think at times something will just catch you, and you think that's not quite right. Things have got to be better there. Whether that's the attitude of a player walking onto the training pitch, or something around the dressing rooms, the tidiness, the cleanliness of the dressing rooms. There's got to be that. There's a famous quote, isn't it? Or a famous thing that happens with the All Blacks, the New Zealand rugby team. And they actually, whenever they play away from home, they leave the dressing room as they found it. And the players scrub the floors, wipe things down.
Yeah, they call that principle "sweep the shed."
Yeah, sweep the shed.
I'm
sure a lot of NFL clubs do.
You're completely right.
Yeah.
And Mark, you and I had an amazing conversation in the past, off record, of course, but we had this conversation where you had Reading. They were 23rd. You had very, very, very limited resources, and you were able to keep them in the championship, get them to 14th, nearly mid-table at that point. What does it look like to turn a club around in that scenario?
Yeah, I was lucky in some respects, because I was, again, for your listeners, it's a strange situation. I was obviously had a long period of being a coach, and then fell into the situation of being the sport director with a very good coach, I thought, called Jose Gomes, Portuguese coach, but we'd had a poor start to the season, and I was in the process then of, let's say, looking to the future and drawing up a short list of coaches to interview to take it forward. And then I was told that, well, with your, if you like, background experience, Mark, we want you, by Chinese owners, we want you to be the coach. And at the time, they were bottom of the championship, the team. And you're like, right. So when I say I was lucky, because I'd had, if you like, a number of games into the season where I'd been watching from the stand. So I knew the team, I knew the players. I had my own feeling how to get out of it and which way to play. And one sort of thing I'll give you is I saw, for example, the team were low on confidence, Alex, and everybody wants to play what we call the beautiful game, play out from the back and through the different phases of play through the pitch. But I could see, if you like, that with the goalkeeper passing it out to the two centre backs, they felt under pressure straight away because they were lacking in confidence. But the coach was not very pragmatic in as much as he just wanted to play this way continually. So I thought, well, first things first, keep it simple. Let's say to them, look, we had, for example, went to the analysts and said, well, how many goal kicks are we getting per game? Well, we're getting 14. Okay. So just simple thing. I went to the team on the training ground and said, okay, so from now on, just from goal kicks, this is what we're going to do. And certainly it's not written in stone. I don't want to do it maybe for the whole game, but we'll have a situation whereby, and I do like a box on the halfway line. That's why I put the keeper under pressure and said, listen, every kick you get, it needs to be in this box. And then if we're doing that, well, every time he kicks the ball, if it happens 14 times, we need to get 12-second balls, or let's say 10-second balls. And that'll be our platform to go and play from there. When you get it down and play, then you get in their half, express yourself, enjoy the game, play. But we need to move our, what I call a platform, from being the edge of our 6-yard box to into their half. And again, cutting a long story short, we did that, we worked on it, and we won the game. The very next game, and I said to the analyst, he came up to me after the game and he looked at me and he said, right, he said, amazing. I said, what? He said, well, we've had 14, as he said, goal kicks, and we've won 12-second balls. And from those 12-second balls, and he went into other details, we did this, we did that. So it straight away took a little bit of pressure from the team to say, well, what's our game plan? How can you simplify it? So I did that, and then again, going from there, quick, it's like confidence breeds from winning games, and confidence turned a little bit, and we we finished the season in a really rich. I mean, at one point, with too many teams above us, but we thought, well, could we get in the playoffs? Because we were, really playing well and confident going into every game. And I knew we had good players, and one of such is the young lad Michael Olise, now who's playing for Real Madrid. And believe me, again, for any of your listeners who don't know him, you will soon enough, because he's a absolutely fantastic player, and I'm sure he'll star for France in the World Cup.
Absolutely. And you're in another beautiful challenge. So you're the director of football at Forest Green Rovers. It's a turnaround scenario. Dropped out of the football league, starting up again. After everything you experienced at the highest levels, what about this specific challenge is so appealing to you?
Well, I had a difficult time at going back to the Reading thing then, because again, I'm trying to simplify here. Let's just say that the Chinese owners at Reading, the money dried up, and I don't know if it was because the Bank of China wouldn't let him bring the money out, or he's just seeing problems with his business after COVID. But the money situation really dried up at Reading and left me with a whole catalogue of problems. I mean, the players weren't getting paid at times. The wages were coming in late. There was, because they'd overspent in the past. We had points reductions. We had transfer embargoes. Any number of things. It was just almost every day you're going into the workplace and having to put out fires everywhere. So it really did. It emotionally, it ground me down, and it was really. I think I wouldn't say it affected my mental health, but it certainly I had a long period where you're thinking, wow, this is getting on top of me. There was just so much going on. So when I had the opportunity then, and I spoke to the owner of Forest Green Rovers, and again, for you people who were listening there, it's you can look us up. We're the number one vegan club or sustainable club in world football, voted by FIFA, because our owner, that's his beliefs. He believes in sustainability first and foremost. All the food at the stadium and at the training ground is vegan. Come on to a lot of other things of that in a while. But when I met him and he said to me, okay, Mark, he asked me the question, what are you looking for? And I said to him, his name is Dale Vince. I said, Dale, just two things, really. I said, I'd love to work in a club that's got ambition, because I've missed that certainly over the last 2 or 3 years at Reading. And I said, and secondly, I want to work in a club with good people. And he said to me, he sort of smiled, a wry smile, and he said, well, I think we can promise you the first bit, but you'll have to decide on the second piece. He's been a fabulous owner. He lets you get on with your job, doesn't interfere, backs you, very interested in the game. And I think they were in League One, the club were, and had 2 relegations in 2 years, and last year wasn't, in terms of performances, let's say in terms of results, it was okay. They got to the playoffs last year, but I think he'd lost his mojo a bit with the way they were playing the game. So I'm sure he's got that back now. He loves turning up at the stadium. He gets excited with the brand of football we're playing, and it's a chance. Probably the main thing to answer your question, Alex, is it's a chance for me to go and, let's say, build something. I think every, let's say, sport director, any coach, I think, would say the same thing. You'd like the chance of a little bit of longevity, that you can put something into place so you can have a plan to go ahead. And I think that's what he's promised me, is a chance. Look, you get time, go and take us back into the league over a number of years, and let's see where we can go with this. So it does take the pressure off a bit to look at a club and think, right, perhaps obviously not as much pressure as, the teams in the top leagues, in the Premier Leagues, but it is pressure in another way, because you want to succeed for the owner, and I'll have time to do it.
Mark, we've had an amazing conversation today, as we always do. You're a proper legend at so many clubs, and I want to go a little bit deeper. Your daughter's on the West End stage. Your son is the head of performance at a football club. Your other son is a recruitment analyst in the game. The sport didn't just shape you, it shaped your whole family.
Yeah,
What do you understand about this game that it can actually give a person?
I think it's character building, isn't it? It makes you strive for things. Certainly to try and strive to follow your dreams. That's the main thing. I'll tell you a little story I had. So I've got 3 children. They're in their 30s now, but the middle one, Josh, he's again head of development, and he's been working at the top of the game for the last 15 years. When I was at Birmingham City, he was in the academy, and he was 14 years old at the time, and he was small, very small, but he had a lot of talent, but he was very small, and sometimes missed out in games, and he was on the bench because the physicality was he couldn't really cope with the physicality. So at the time I was assistant manager and first team coach at Bowen City, and I'd go take him to the academy in the evenings, and I'd go and do some work in the office and pick him up afterwards. Didn't interfere at all. And then one game I was coming back, he was one training session, he was sat by the car in the front seat. I looked across at him and he had tears in his eyes. And I said, "What's the matter?" And he just looked at me, a really profound moment. He said, "Dad, I'm not going to be good enough, am I?" And you sort of sit there and you think, well, right, how do I handle this one? And it was like, well, look, okay. Thought, I'll try and be as honest as I can with him. And I said, well, okay, maybe, you don't know, but if you're feeling that way, I said, you can still work in the game. You can still work at any level in the game, but you can be a coach, you could be a sports scientist, you can be, any number of things in the game. And he just nodded. And then my wife and I went to these like parents and teachers meeting. I think it was maybe 3-4 months later. And almost like from the first teacher we went to and said like, right. And they said, "Oh yeah, you're Josh's mum and dad." And they looked and they said, "What have you been doing?" And we said, "What do you mean?" So, well, he's gone from being like a C student to a straight A student in about 3-4 months. The quality of his work has just gone through the roof. And it's, unbeknown to us, it was probably that thing, it just clicked in his mind. He said, right, I want to work in football. And he ended up doing, he went to a top university in the UK called Loughborough University, and he got his sports science degree and got his master's degree. And then he get a little help because of my connections in football, but he went into I think his first club he went into was West Ham with Sam Allardyce, and he's worked in the game since. So again, to answer your question, I think the sport and the game itself, it gives you things to achieve, because you can see, if you like, the rewards that you get. Not just monetary, although that it doesn't go unnoticed that the money that players earn these days. But I think it's just the environment, and so I think all my kids, I could probably say, they've never had to do what I would class let's say a normal day's work in their life. You know what I mean? And then again, that's a great thing. Long it continues. So they work very, very hard, by the way, at what they do, but they've not exactly had to go and sit behind a desk or go and do manual, whatever labour somewhere. So, but they've worked hard at it. They have. But again, it's probably given them the insight of looking into a situation. Well, if I work hard, there are clear things that I can do and fulfill my dreams.